Welcome to the Believe, Be Real, Be Bold podcast for authentic daters. I'm your host, Dave in Denver. Each week, we invite expert guests to come share their knowledge, tools, and tips to help you show up as your most authentic self.
Hi guys, welcome back to the Believe, Be Real, Be Bold podcast. I'm so ecstatic to introduce my next guest, Mr. Geoff Laughton. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing great, Dave. Thank you very much for inviting me to be here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule. We were chatting before we started hitting record, getting to know each other better. But what I like to start with is, what's your purpose and how did you get started in doing this men's work, leadership, relationship coaching that you're doing?
You bet. Well, my mission is pretty simple and yet not so easy, perhaps. And that is to, one, be able to really have an impact on the state of gender relations, how men and women interact with each other, understand each other, can partner up with each other in the most empowering ways that respects the differences, but even more importantly, really makes the best use of the similarities. And the avenue in which I find that to be the most doable is in the realm of relationships. So working with people in their relationships, but also working with men in particular, because men, I think, need a little bit more help in that self-growth, self-expansion arena. It doesn't come naturally. And then if I were going to condense all that down into one soundbite, my mission is to help people be fully comfortable in their own skin without apology and to just go for living the most authentic them they can.
Yeah, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Well, and I just remembered your second question, which how did I get started? And the short version of it really was in two stages. After being in the corporate world for a long time and finding myself getting progressively unhappy, fat, and just miserable, because I used to weigh 120 pounds more than I do now.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you. And so I was really kind of hitting the wall with the misery factor and started doing work on myself, doing transformational work with teachers and doing workshops and all that. And in the course of doing that kind of work, totally got reconnected to what has really been my passion for the mission that I've had since I was a boy. So getting back into those kinds of personal growth spaces, I just realized, oh my God, I went to school to do this. I got sidelined for 17 years, and that was really still what I wanted to do. So I just began hanging out my shingle to be a life coach, and that evolved over the years into developing a niche around working with people in relationships that probably has a lot to do with the fact that I'm in a great one that I've been in for 37 years so far. Part two, about men in particular, was having been raised by women and having a sister, and even our dogs were female. I didn't have a whole lot of I didn't have healthy, good male role models, let's put it that way. And so when my wife and I had a son together, when he was getting ready to move into being a teenager, a buddy of mine put together an initiation ceremony for him to initiate him into manhood. And he worked with him for a year to get him ready. And in the course of going through that day with him, and just watching him blossom and seeing how much intention he put into getting the most out of this. I was sitting there sobbing at the end of the day, realizing that I had a young man in this older body that was going, well, damn it, I never got that kind of thing. So I went and found an experience that was available and still is to men to have that kind of rite of passage initiation into manhood and a community of men. And that changed everything for me. And I went and did that weekend, and I've been involved in men's groups ever since. So that'll be 19 years in January. And over those years, I've just, been in hundreds of groups, led hundreds of groups, and have had my own men's community, the Evolving Man community, for almost 12 years now.
Congratulations. It sounds like one hell of a journey.
It has been that, and it continues to be that. You ain't done until you take your last breath.
That's very true. And when you were introducing yourself, I can relate a lot about being resistant and hesitant to opening up and being vulnerable and working on myself. It took me 18 or 19 years once I became an adult before I learned how to be humble enough to say, I got to do the work on me. Otherwise, I'm never going to get to where I want to be. Is that similar to who it is that you find coming to you most often?
I do, I'd say that with the men, and I don't actually, now that I think about it, I don't know that it's all that different with the couples who come to me for coaching or even individuals who come to me. The one thing that they all have in common, and then I'll speak to, the men in particular that tend to gravitate. The one thing that I know all of them have in common is a sense that no matter, how nice the outside of their lives might look, wife, kids, husband, 2.3 kids, 1.5 dogs, and 2 cars, all that crap, a lot of people have that. And yet there's a phenomenally heartbreaking level of loneliness and restlessness, some would even call it boredom, that people are suffering. And so people tend to come to me for coaching, or the men that come wanting to know more about our men's community. They're people that are tired of being lonely. They realize, now speaking to men more than women, most every guy that's ever found their way into any of our groups have shared a very common theme. I don't have many men friends, if any. And I think, because while we do have a lot of men involved in their 20s, on average, the men that tend to find us or be gravitated towards us are men in their mid-30s and up, which I remember in my mid-30s, that was when I went through my first midlife crisis, which had nothing to do with women. It had everything to do with who the hell am I? And why am I not liking how I feel being me? And I think that men are waking up to the fact that, years of trying to figure that out just in here is a one-way ticket to hell, because you can't trust your mind farther than you can throw it. And that's where the gift of being with other men who are sharing similar kinds of feelings, that maybe have also gone through, all kinds of traumatic struggles with fathers not being very available, or in my case, not around at all when I was growing up. And then having children, for those who do, when you have kids, that's the great leveler. Because whatever you haven't dealt with in yourself, your children are going to bring it up, and it's going to be right there, no matter how hard you might try to avoid it or look away. And like I was sharing with you before we started recording, that was how I got into men's work myself. I had a kid, a boy, who was looking to me to help kind of mentor him into manhood. And I was like, Jesus, I have no idea how to do that for a boy. So I think that that's the common thread, is a desire for authenticity. Like, okay, if I'm not happy with who I am, then who am I? And how do I find that out? And then if they begin to get a sense of that, the next part is, why am I here? So purpose, mission, vision. That's something that I think every human has a hunger to know and to live. But men are pretty wired to be the producer and the protector. That goes back a few millennia. And so how do you know the best way to do that, and a balanced way to do that, if you really don't know what you want to be, or even how you want to be when you grow up?
You're preaching to the choir, sir. I mean, everything that you mentioned right there, it hits home and it lands right where it's supposed to for me at this part of the journey that I'm on.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how good parenting is, no matter how good your children are, parenting is still hard. And and you're absolutely right that they will expose the good, the bad, and the ugly in all of us.
Oh yeah.
And by me raising a 16-year-old daughter with her mom, co-parenting as much as we possibly can, getting better at it, the older she gets, it's still every single time that we interact and communicate between my daughter and I, it's a new experience.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I find it to be the same. My youngest is going to be 32, and he's a grown-ass man, but he still wants my advice every now and then around how to navigate marriage, or how to navigate life changes. And so you never stop being a parent, no matter how old your kids get. You're always going to be dad, right, or mom.
Mm-hmm.
So it helps if we're walking our own talk, because that's the other thing I'm sure you've noticed, particularly having a teenager. They smell BS a mile away.
And they'll call you on it too.
Oh, no kidding. I mean, if you're BSing your kid, it's like your credibility goes right down the commode. So you better be walking your talk.
That's very, very true. They'll try to use it against you in order to push their own boundaries of like, am I an adult yet? Or am I still under your rules? Or I don't even see you following your own rules, etc.
Yep, exactly.
So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Go ahead.
You've published 3 books, and in doing a little bit of background research, I noticed that you use this analogy. How are relationships like a house?
Mm-hmm. So that's the question?
Yes, absolutely. Let's clarify your analogy that I liked so much.
Yeah, well, it really, so think about it. When you get to that place in life, however old you are, where you're getting ready to say buy your first house, and you're with a partner, let's presume, and so here you are in this joint venture where you want to get a home, that is going to serve your needs, that is going to make you feel good to be in it when you're in it. You have to know, what kind of house you want. You have to understand where you want to live, like where's the best location. And then if you have the location and you have to have a pretty good idea of what kind of home you want, not just aesthetically, but functionally. And then you say you buy that house, you find something that really fits, and you buy it. And then there's that period between when you sign the purchase agreement and you close. And during that time, if you're smart, you and your partner are talking about, how do we want to furnish it? What do we want the decorations to be like? What's the energy that we want to have be visually there that evokes a similar energy inside of us? And then if you have kids or you're planning on having kids, you also need to look at, how are we going to, do we have a room for a nursery? Do we have a room for the kids? Can we grow into it? Is this a starter? And then we're going to go bigger as the family grows. All those kinds of things, when you stop to think about it, are the same kinds of things you need to be doing in a relationship. Because the normal arc of relationship for a lot of people is you date, you meet, you kind of get interested in somebody, and you keep dating, and then you go more and more into, ooh, I think this might be the one. And you're having all of these hormonal things going on while all that's happening. So your biochemistry is going bananas. And it gets easy to mistake that initial first year biochemical orgy of this feels great. You can confuse that as, well, we are really a great couple for each other. We're meant for each other. And so you can see a house that you think is going to be really great, but if you don't design how you want the house to look, feel, and operate, and if you don't do that in your relationship up front, which in the 21 years I've been working with couples, it's amazing to me how many do not do that legwork. They just go by, emotions and hormones, and confuse that with what compatibility actually is. So then all that wears off, or maybe you pick the wrong house, and it doesn't take you more than a year or two to realize, oh, this isn't what we thought it was going to be. So that's where I saw the connection, having gone through several houses with my wife over the years, and looking back at things we would do over again, and then looking at things that we would probably both do differently in terms of how we started our relationship. That's what helped me make the connection. And then if you're like me, where you've been in a marriage or a relationship for a really long time, you find that first home, your economics improve, your family grows. Well, now we've got to up level. We need to get a bigger house, or we want to live in a better school district. If you don't go through that in your relationship, you're in trouble, or you will be in trouble, because the relationship I started with my wife, we're not the same people now that we were 37 years ago. So between what life throws at you, the kind of internal changes we all go, you've got to be periodically looking at how you want to redecorate or renovate, or just tear the whole thing down and start newly. Those are things that come in relationship over time. So I hope that answered your question.
Absolutely. I really like the analogy. And when we are shopping for our home, our first home, and maybe even our second home, realtors and mortgage lenders will encourage us to compromise between yourself and your partner. And
Right.
that can be a lot can be said to our relationships as well. So over the course of time, beginning, middle, and end, there's the compromise that's included in there. So,
Well, absolutely. And I think just whether it's a house or a relationship, the problem, I mean, I agree with the notion that compromise is valuable. The problem becomes, number one, if either partner has developed a pattern with the other of either telling them what they think they want to hear, or you've got your own crap going on and you don't want to be completely vulnerable, and women throughout that are listening to this right now are going, yeah, I know that about my guy, right? So, if compromise doesn't work unless both people are actually starting from a place of 100% transparent, authentic truth. Whether you think or know your partner is going to, crap a brick or not about what you might have to say, you've got to start there. Because if you don't, you're trying to compromise on top of a compromise that's built on fear and secrets and probably shame. So talk about building a new house on a defective foundation. There's a recipe where compromise can really turn into a real problem.
I hear you 100%. And coming back to the speaking to men specifically, how do we be the leaders in that relationship so that compromise can exist, so that we can build a strong foundation?
I'm going to give you a really, really short answer, which is not typical for me, but you always got to grow. Here it is. Everybody listening, make sure you write this down. Here we go. Tell the truth.
I'm going to let that sink in. I wanted that long pause there because that is true. Absolutely true. It's simple, and yet it's so completely hard.
It's only hard, and I think this is really the cutting edge of growth. It's hard when you confuse what you're thinking and feeling for who you are and what your truth actually is. So when your ego is running your life, it can be really hard to tell the truth. Because your ego, can I use one swear word?
Please.
Your ego is making shit up every day. And most of us are walking around, I'd say 98.5%. We're walking around believing that all that shit we're making up is the truth. So we tell that. And a lot of the time it isn't the truth. So if you factor that piece in, combined with whatever habits we may have built up with our partner over time, that actually also we learned and helped grow when we were growing up. So, doo-doo runs downhill. And so patterns that we observed and emulated growing up, we're also bringing into our current day relationships at some level. So it's only hard if you really believe that your job is to make everyone else happy first. And I'm not condoning narcissistic nihilism by any stretch, but Shakespeare said, "To thine own self be true." And if you and your partner aren't starting there, if you're not starting there with you, then how does your relationship have any kind of really, truly deep trust that you can rely on, so that when you are needing to compromise, you're starting from understanding, well, this is what's true for me, this is what's true for me. Where is there give in there and where is there not? And those can be petrifying conversations to have. But if you're willing to tell the truth because you can't live with yourself being a lie unto yourself, then I'm not saying it'll be smooth or warm and fuzzy much of the time, but it'll be real. And when you're in the truth, things actually are easier, or they get that way. There's a great expression, I didn't make it up, but I learned it years ago. The truth will set you free, but first it'll piss you off. True that.
Yeah, you've got to face that reality when you stop believing your own bullshit, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the operative thing. And part of why, I so enjoy working with men is because I think we have so much pressure on us culturally and societally to be like, to fit some model of what a real man is. And there's as many flavors of manhood or masculinity as there are people. So being, conditioned into, here's your runway that you're supposed to stay within. Well, then what the hell do you do when that runway bears no resemblance whatsoever to who you are, what matters to you, and what opens you up or closes you down? So we don't know our own bullshit half the time. So that's like job one, is to be sure that you have people around you that that you empower. That's an important part. You empower them to call you on your bullshit if they smell it. It might not always be right, but to have somebody that is really for you, they're just going to go, I have a good sense of who you are, and what you just said, I ain't buying it. Doesn't feel, something's off.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have people like that in your life, whether it's friends or family members that you trust, or as you and I were talking about earlier, men's groups. That's why I've been in a men's group without fail the last 19 years myself, is because I can still BS myself till the cows come home. If I go to sleep, I can be completely full of it with myself. And so I really am enormously grateful that I've got men in my life that actually love me enough to go, dude, no,
Yep.
not buying that sale.
Yep. And it's a hard, I believe, in my own personal opinion, my own journey, that the hardest thing for me to do was start.
Yep.
Get started sifting through my own BS, get started opening up just a little bit more and being vulnerable. And once I did, I saw great strides forward very, very quickly.
Yep, me too.
If you were to speak to, say, the men listening, where's a great place to start sifting through your own BS?
Great question. And there's two answers that immediately come to mind. Number one, ask the people closest to you. So if you're in a relationship, ask your woman. Ask your best friend or friends that have known you for a long time. And you go to them and you say, you know, because I'm human, I think I might be full of shit more than I know. So could you just give me a few examples of where you've either felt or suspected that something I said to you wasn't quite adding up, but you just were, you know, too polite to say anything to me? That's one avenue. There's actually three. I just thought of a third one. Second thing you can do is take a look at your entire relationship history. You know, even going back to high school, your first, you know, if you had a quote unquote serious relationship in high school that lasted longer than 10 times of having sex or 6 months, whichever came first, go back and look at each one and look at how did they end, who ended it, and if you had to kind of summarize what the main culprit was for it not working, what was it? And if you tally all that up and look through it all from this very important perspective, which is, I'm the only cause and responsible party for everything I just wrote down. I don't get to blame the woman or the guy, depending on your preference. All me. You're going to see patterns show up. And if even one of those has you going, oh my God, I should have had a V8, well, there's an area where you have been buying your own bullshit. Or another meaning of BS, blind spot.
I like that a lot.
There's been a blind spot that you weren't seeing for obvious reasons. The third thing is to, whether you're a man or a woman, because some of the most amazing women I know are part of women's groups. Go find a circle of women or men, depending on your gender. Go find a circle of men or women who are devoted to authenticity and growth. Don't go looking for a knitting circle where you can just, you know, sit and bitch about women or men, but other people of your gender that are committed to wanting an unvarnished mirror of everything that's great about you and everything that has room for growth and development, and does it with compassion, without judgment, or if judgment pops up, which they do because we're all human, that's dealt with in a really powerful way and in an honest way. Any of those three are good starting points, and I think in looking at what typically for men gets men to consider that, so any of you dudes that are listening to this that have ever gotten any help, I would bet my right nut that the thing that got you to go look for help was because you couldn't stand the pain anymore. We don't go get help. In general, your average human doesn't reach out for help until we're suffering too much. I'd really love to see that be different. I can count on one hand the number of people who have ever called me up over the last 20 years and said, I'd like to talk about, you know, improving myself, because my life is really good and I want to take it to an even more awesome level. Less than 5 people. So to the men or women listening, if any of what Dave and I are talking about are making you pucker up a little bit or making your stomach get a little queasy, there's your sign that maybe there's something here for you that doesn't require you to go into abject misery and suffering. And if you have children, dragging them along for the ride with you when they didn't even vote for that, there's some ideas about what you can do to get started.
That's fantastic advice, and I'm going to take you up on that. If somebody wants to get a hold of you and reach out and learn a little bit more about you and what you do, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
You can email me at Geoff, that's Geoff, at yourrelationshiparchitect.com. That's my email for my overall, self and couples relationship work. Then if you're a woman or a man, and I say women because probably 90% of any men I've ever sat in a circle with got there because of their women. Hate to say that, but it's true. So if you want to know more about the men's work that I'm up to and our community that's growing for men, then go to theevolvingman.com.
I'll put all that information in the blog post and the show notes below so that you guys can reach out to Geoff. I really appreciate your time. I know that you're very busy, and really loved everything that we talked about today. It hits home. Those are my blind spots, and I am seeking that community, that small group of men who are going to lift me up and call me out or call me forth. And so
I'm sorry. One thing that you just made me think of that I also want to add in, because I'm sure your audience is national, if not global. We, to my knowledge, are innovators in the Evolving Man of creating men's circles that meet just the way Dave and I are talking right now on this video conferencing platform. So we actually have all virtual groups that have men from all over the world in them. So if you're hearing what Dave's saying and you want to learn more, geography is generally not an issue.
That's right. Zoom calls makes the world very, very small.
Oh my God, it's awesome.
And it's a free service if you're doing it one-on-one. It's very minimal expense if you're doing it as a group. And I can't thank you enough for recommending and reminding us that geography does not matter. The internet is a very powerful tool when we use it correctly and with strong enough purpose to impact other people's lives.
Yep.
So thank you again, Geoff. What do you say in the next 6 to 12 months if we don't see each other at the Evolving Men group events? We jump back on and we see how far we've come.
I would love that. I'd be honored. Thank you very much.
It would be my pleasure. And if there was one thing that you would send us off with today, you get the floor for just a few seconds, and here you go.
Okay. Love boldly, love audaciously, and tell the friggin' truth.
I'm on board. When we connect again in person or on Zoom, you're going to be able to ask me if I loved boldly, audaciously, and if I told the truth from now until then.
Awesome. And if you have any doubt, your daughter will let you know.
Isn't that the truth? Well, I appreciate you again, Geoff. Thanks again.
Thank you, Dave.
Talk to you soon.